It's the Innovation Podcast.
Hi there, it's Garnet Harriman.
I'm Mark Reed Edwards. Garnet, it's good to finally be putting some bits on the computer for this project that we've talked about for a while. And this is a special preview episode of the Innovation Podcast, or as we've come to call it, the iPod. We've got to hashtag that one definitely. So why don't we talk about what we plan to do on the Innovation Podcast?
Sounds great. So we've been working on this for at least a few months and batting it around ever since I had the pleasure of being one of your guests on Confessions of a Marketer.
Yeah.
And our thoughts center around having a broader survey of the wide world of innovation.
Yeah.
Across technologies and processes and new businesses, new investment themes, corporate activities, the whole kit and caboodle.
And so we did have a discussion recently with a couple of fellas, James Kern and Chris Clegg, about the current state of the experiential marketing field. And we'll post that one soon. But can you give a preview of that discussion?
Absolutely. I think you and I both share an interest, and you much higher level of expertise in marketing. But we share a love for branding in particular. Mm-hmm. And part of our original conversation on Confessions of a Marketer was all about, hey, what's the future of branding and technologies that support branding and themes and patterns. And so I have always been fascinated by experiential. I've come to realize in the last 12 to 18 months, in terms of looking at investment opportunities across live entertainment, event tech, all sorts of things, that float around that space, how critical experiential is for branding in general.
Right.
I mean, I would go so far as to say that the future of brands is experiences. What do you think?
I think so too. And you see that trend in banking even. You see that, banks are trying to make the branch less like a bank and more like an Apple store. It's more of an experience to go into. And I guess Capital One is running a big campaign now where they kind of say, yeah, we're a bank, but we're different. We have cool looking branches, and that's kind of it's all aimed at improving the experience of going to a bank, which can be a painful one for people. And I think that a lot of brands like that are realizing that the experience is paramount for their customers.
I think that's absolutely dead on. And I would echo your observation for banking across all of retail. And I think maybe we started to see signs of this in retail a little bit earlier. Where stores don't carry too much inventory, but they are focused on creating an immersive experience for customers and, supporting the lifestyle activities that go with that, that align with that particular product and,
right.
So on and so forth. It's really compelling to see what's going on in retail these days. It's just not really about the product and the inventory. It's more about the lifestyle.
Yeah. Or think about, the Apple store, the POS is nowhere to be seen, right? And the desks are clean and it's all about the experience for the consumer. And I went to a hotel this past weekend and it was similar in this new hotel. There was a desk, but there was no big cash register or POS. It was all kind of invisible to the guest. And again, that's experience. That's a different experience for the customer.
Wow, that sounds really interesting, that hotel. I may need to get that reference for my next business trip.
It wasn't even a high-end hotel, though.
Is that right? That's even more interesting.
Yeah. So it was, the kind of hotel that I stay in, which is not... these aren't Four Seasons or Ritzes. These are kind of mid-level hotels that are, very nice, but they've focused, I think, on the actual guest experience rather than, well, we got to put a desk there with a cash register or a POS, whatever you want to call it, and, just churn out money. Instead, they focus on kind of the guest experience.
I have a quote for you from one of the two guests that we were fortunate enough to have on the inaugural podcast coming up. When we do rather than buy, every brand is an experience.
Right.
There's a lot of food for thought in that, sort of sententious phrasing.
Yeah.
But it makes perfect sense. In an era, and it's funny because my mind runs towards all of the sort of technology that drives the manufacturing of so many different things, and the open borrowing, if not copying, of features in products and services, and in the developed world, so many products and so many services are essentially at parity,
Right,
in terms of the features and the benefits. And then what's really kind of intriguing to me about this view of the world is that the last sort of competitive front, the last front on which you can be competitive, is this world of experience and world of like how you immerse your customers in this experience that they then walk away with as being synonymous with your brand.
right. And then, of course, there's data science is critical to studying the effect of what it is that you do to improve someone's experience, and that's something we'll cover.
Yeah, I think our second guest, on this inaugural podcast is an expert, and his methodology has been used by lots of major brands, and he had a lot of really compelling things to say about how you gather things, what methodology you use, and then the kinds of messaging that comes out of it in terms of making your marketing activities, especially experiential activities, better.
Yeah, and that's Chris Clegg of Portma, and that'll be an interesting discussion to share with our listeners, because when you think of experiential marketing, you think of it's kind of soft. It's kind of, make the experience better, but how can you measure that? And Chris told us exactly how, and how critical it is to measure it, in fact.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk over the years about things like facial expression and eye tracking, even galvanic response, which strikes me as a little intrusive in terms of measuring sweat at an experience and so on and so forth. But, getting the quantitative piece right around something as invisible to the naked eye, as it were, as an experience.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bugaboo for a lot of big brands until the right tools are out there and the right platforms are out there. And I think we're super fortunate that these two guys that we have on our first show are literally in the cutting edge, literally in the avant-garde about, putting that together.
So let's talk about James and Chris. It's a great discussion, and that's going to be episode 1 and maybe episode 2. There was a lot of stuff we talked about, but how about some of the other guests that you're thinking of bringing on the show?
Well, yeah, so you and I have complementary backgrounds in terms of, taking an investment perspective on things and taking a marketing and branding perspective on things. My wish list for some of the folks that I'd like to have on going forward and that our listeners can expect to see, not surprisingly, have taken more of an investment perspective on things, and some of them come out of corporate innovation. Some of them come out of, straight financial investing. I'll just run some thoughts by you and by way of teasing some information to our listeners. A buddy of mine, Quentin Messer, is the City of New Orleans Economic Development head. And as you and probably many of the listeners know, New Orleans is essentially the latest in a series of improbable venture capital and startup hubs that have arisen around the country.
Right.
And it's quite a success story post-Katrina. I am excited to be an advisor to a lot of companies. One company in particular is on record as having the world's best and fastest facial recognition software, in particular for events and live events. And the CEO of that company, Zenus, my colleague Panos Moutafis, will be joining us at some point during the year. I think the other person I'd love to talk about with you and listeners is my buddy Bill Westcott from MediaLink. Mm-hmm. MediaLink is kind of a matchmaker between Hollywood and big broadcast and big cable and the world of sort of disruptive startup technologies. So bringing those two worlds together is not always the easiest thing to do, and that's their stock in trade. So very exciting.
So first episode will be the week of the 14th of January. We're going to get together sometime early that week to do some stuff live and in person, and we'll put that episode with James Kern and Chris Clegg out that week.
Exciting stuff. I can't wait.
Yeah, it's fun. Oh, and the other thing I meant to mention is you're heading to CES.
Yes, I am.
You're going to have your phone with you, and you'll do some on-location interviews. So that'll be interesting. CES is probably going to have a lot on 5G and smart home and stuff like that. What are you going to focus on when you're out there?
I'm interested in both of those things. They're not necessarily the top of my list for CES this year, but I'm going to be looking at AR, VR. I'm going to be looking at AI in both enterprise and consumer-facing apps and platforms. I'm going to be looking at an arena that I've been watching for several years right now and have actually invested in, which has to do with COPPA compliance, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which is gaining more and more currency and importance. I think Facebook, YouTube, Snapchat, every one of them have been sued by at least one state attorney general. In some cases, like the hapless Facebook, as multiple states attorneys general in 2018 for violating, essentially these regulations that are geared toward protecting children online.
Yeah.
And so I've been watching that space in terms of how you create technology that enables video and content and mobile games to safely and legally connect to kids who are under 12 years of age.
Right.
So that's another thing that, there's in Digital West, I think it is, there's a whole series of events and displays all around connected play, connected kids, the future thereof. So that's a big thing.
Well, great. I can't wait to get this started, to start talking to people and start getting all these episodes out on the airwaves, as it were. It's going to be a lot of fun, Garnet. Looking forward to it.
So am I, Mark. I really appreciate it. And I think our audience is going to love the stuff that we do this year. And hopefully we'll get good feedback and just keep growing the effort.
Yep. Thanks. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Mark.